What's a cold truth about life that everybody needs to hear? Block 1. The illusion of success. Mikita was an ordinary guy, like most of his peers. He had a big dream: to become a successful entrepreneur. From a young age, he was taught that only hard work and dedication could lead to success. He believed this because everyone around him said the same thing. He graduated from university, secured a job at one of the biggest companies in the city, and started climbing the corporate ladder. The first few years were a blur of long hours and sleepless nights. Mikita pushed himself harder and harder, convinced that if he worked relentlessly, success would inevitably follow. There was no other way. His friends and family often told him to slow down, to take a break, but Mikita ignored them. He had a goal, and nothing could stop him from achieving it. The problem was, the more he worked, the more he felt the distance growing between himself and the people he cared about. His friends started to feel like distant memories, and his family's voices on the phone became increasingly rare. Mikita was so absorbed in his quest for success that he didn't even notice how much time had passed. He didn't have time for fun, for hobbies, or for the people who mattered most in his life. And yet, he thought it was worth it. He'd heard the phrase so many times: success doesn't come without sacrifice. And he lived by it. Every hour he spent working felt like a step closer to his dream. But despite all the sacrifices, there was one thing Mikita couldn't escape. His life was passing by, and he was missing it. But Mikita never stopped to question the path he was on. He thought that if he kept pushing himself, if he kept making those sacrifices, he would eventually have everything he wanted. He didn't realize that there was a cold truth he was avoiding, a truth that only came to him when he least expected it. One evening, at a corporate event, Mikita had a conversation that would change everything. He met a senior colleague, a man who had been with the company for over 20 years. The man was always serious, often a bit aloof, but on that night they had a one-on-one conversation. Mikita shared his struggles, how he was burning out, working late nights, and sacrificing everything for success. The senior colleague listened quietly, and then, after a long pause, he spoke. "Do you work hard, Mikita?" the man asked. "Yeah, I do. It's the only way to get ahead in this industry. If you're not working 12 hours a day, you're falling behind," Mikita replied. The older man smiled faintly and nodded, but there was something in his eyes that Mikita couldn't place. "Let me tell you something that most people don't want to hear," the man said, his tone soft but firm. "The biggest lie in life is the idea that working hard, non-stop, will get you everything you want. Yes, you have to work, but your success is not entirely dependent on how many hours you put in. In fact, the more you work, the more you lose. The time you can never get back, the relationships you let fade away, and sometimes even your health. All in the name of this illusion that someday, when you reach the top, it will all be worth it." Mikita felt a chill run through him. He didn't know how to respond. The words the older man spoke hit him hard. Everything he had been doing, everything he had been sacrificing, suddenly felt less clear. He tried to rationalize it. "I'm just doing what's necessary. I'll catch up with people later. I can always make time for them once I've achieved my goals." But the senior colleague shook his head. "Life doesn't wait for you. The more you chase something, the more you miss out on the things that really matter. You'll reach the top, sure, but when you look around, who will be there with you to celebrate it? Success without people to share it with isn't success at all. And by the time you realize this, it might be too late to fix what you've lost." Mikita was silent. His mind raced. Could it be true? Could all this time he had sacrificed in the name of his career, all the moments he had given up, be worth nothing in the end? Block 2. The realization. The conversation lingered in Mikita's mind for weeks. He went back to work, his routine unchanged, but now something had shifted. The drive for success that had once felt so certain, so clear, now seemed much less appealing. He began to notice things he hadn't before. The loneliness in the office, the way his colleagues were also running on empty, never stopping for a break, always working, always chasing. He saw the toll it took on their relationships, their health, and their happiness. He noticed how few of them actually seemed to enjoy the fruits of their success. Most of them were just as tired as he was, just as disconnected from the world outside of work. Mikita started to question his choices. He'd always believed that the more you worked, the more you'd get. But what if that wasn't true? What if the price of success was simply too high? He began to make small changes. He started saying no to unnecessary overtime. He took weekends off. He started calling his friends more often, planning trips to visit family. Slowly, he began to rebuild relationships that had been on the back burner for years. He wasn't ready to give up on his career entirely, but he realized that he needed to find a balance, or he would lose everything. One day, Mikita was walking through the park after work, enjoying a rare moment of peace. As he sat on a bench, reflecting on everything he had learned, he realized the cold truth. Success isn't just about working harder than everyone else. It's about understanding that life is fragile and that time is limited. The more you sacrifice, the more you risk losing the very things that make life worth living. The harsh reality was that the sacrifices he had made for his career might not have been worth it. The more he worked, the more he lost. It wasn't just about money or status, it was about time. Time he would never get back. Time with family, friends, and experiences that couldn't be bought or replaced. And in the end, no matter how high you climbed on the corporate ladder, you couldn't take any of it with you. The cold truth Mikita learned. Success doesn't come without sacrifice, but not all sacrifices are worth making. The more you chase something, the more you risk losing the things that matter most. It's a bitter lesson, but one that will stay with him forever. This story captures the cold truth about life in the form of a Reddit-style reflection, focusing on the cost of relentless ambition and the realization that there are things more valuable than career success. Let me know if you need further revisions or additions.